pressed the elevator doors closed, but just as they began to slide shut, they dinged open again, Ethan's hand holding them back. He barely managed to step forward before I lunged, blocking him with a hard shove. "I have to get to her," he insisted, urgency sharpening his voice. I caught his arm, pulling him back just as the doors started to close once more. "Ethan, wait!" I hissed, my grip firm. "Ariana told us to stay put. We have to trust her. If we keep pushing, we'll only make things worse." Ethan shot me a frustrated look, his brow furrowing. "She's with that guy. Do you think I'm just going to sit here while he's probably hurting her?" "Just think for a second," I snapped, my heart pounding in my chest. "If we keep pestering her about him, she won't have enough time to figure things out with him on her own. We need to give her space." He paused, eyes narrowing as he crossed his arms defiantly. "Do you really enjoy this, Matthew? Do you actually like him being with our sister?" I opened my mouth to protest, the question catching me off guard. "I didn't say I liked him," I stammered, my cheeks warming at the accusation. "Okay, at first I did. I won't deny that. But after finding out he forced Ariana into a fake marriage and everything else he's put her through, I can't stand him." Ethan's expression didn't soften. "Then why are you so willing to let her be with him? He's a beast, and we both know it. He'll drag her down with him." I sighed, running a hand through my hair, frustration bubbling just below the surface. "Because she needs to make her own choices, Ethan. I hate what he did to her, but if we keep trying to control her, she'll resent us. Can't you see that?" Ethan's jaw clenched, his gaze flickering towards the elevator doors, as if he expected them to open at any moment. "I just can't stand the thought of her getting hurt again. You know how much she's been through. He's not the kind of guy she needs in her life." "I know," I said, my voice low. "But we can't shield her forever. She has to learn to stand on her own. If this is a mistake, she'll figure it out. We can't be the ones to break her heart before she even has a chance to see what this guy really is." Ethan seemed to wrestle with my words, uncertainty crossing his face. "And if it's not a mistake? What if she's really into him? What if they work things out? Then we need to be there for her when it all blows up in her face," I replied, my tone firm. "But pushing her now will only make things worse. We need to trust her judgment, even if we don't agree with it." Ethan let out a frustrated huff, his shoulders relaxing slightly as he pondered my words. "You really think she'll be okay?" he asked quietly, vulnerability breaking through his bravado. "I want to believe she will be. I have to," I admitted, glancing toward the closed elevator doors, imagining Ariana inside with that man. "But if we want to protect her, we need to respect her choices, even when they scare us." Ethan ran a hand over his face, letting out a heavy breath. "Fine. But if I hear one more thing that makes me think he's hurting her, I'm not going to sit back. I'll do whatever it takes to protect her." "Me too," I said, the weight of the moment settling heavily between us. "But for now, we wait." "Okay, fine, we'll wait," Ethan said, a hint of triumph in his voice. "But at their door." I opened my mouth to counter, but Ethan had already yanked the elevator doors open, practically dragging me inside. "No more arguing," Ethan stated firmly, pressing a button at random. The elevator didn't budge. Matthew," Ethan began, looking down at the confusing panel of buttons, each bearing small, embossed numbers and letters. He frowned. "Which one is the penthouse again?" We exchanged a glance, scanning the daunting array of buttons. That's when I noticed a small audio icon glowing faintly beside the buttons. I leaned forward, cleared my throat, and spoke into it. "Take us to the penthouse." A robotic voice responded almost immediately, smooth and efficient. "All right, heading to the penthouse." The elevator whirred into motion, and we both let out a breath of relief. We rode up in tense silence, wrestling with our own thoughts. The doors slid open with a quiet hiss, and we stepped out, our shoes clicking softly on the sleek stainless steel floor. We exchanged another wary look as we approached the grand double doors of Grayson's penthouse. The place exuded wealth and cold refinement, all glass and steel and sharp edges. I turned to Ethan and raised a brow. "All right, genius, we're here. Now what?" Ethan ignored me, already pressing his ear against the door, straining as if he might catch any sounds from within. I let out a sigh, but after a beat, I found myself doing the same, pressing my ear to the cold surface, listening for any signs of trouble. "Do you hear anything?" I whispered, trying to make out even the faintest of sounds. But there was only silence. Just as I was about to pull back and suggest another approach, the door suddenly swung open, catching both of us off guard. With nothing to brace ourselves on, we tumbled forward, landing unceremoniously on the plush rug in front of Ariana and Grayson, who both stared down at us in a mix of shock and mild exasperation. Heat crept up my neck as I lay there, feeling more than a little foolish. This was not exactly the heroic intervention I'd had in mind. I glanced over at Ethan, who looked equally taken aback, but didn't seem half as embarrassed as I was. Ariana folded her arms, eyebrows raised as she looked between the two of us. "What are you doing?" I scrambled to my feet, brushing myself off. Well, we, just wanted to check on you," I stammered, feeling the weight of Grayson's hard gaze like a burning spotlight. It was as if he could see straight through every flimsy excuse I was trying to conjure up. Ethan, completely unfazed, stood up and crossed his arms defiantly, eyeing Grayson as if he were ready for a standoff. "We were just making sure you're safe, Ariana," he said, his voice firm. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "What Ethan means is, we didn't mean to intrude." I shot Ethan a pointed look, but he just ignored me, his gaze steady and challenging as he faced Grayson. Grayson's jaw tightened, and he folded his arms, mirroring Ethan's stance with an unreadable expression. I couldn't tell if he was amused, annoyed, or about to toss us both out. Probably all three. Ariana pinched the bridge of her nose, clearly exasperated. "You know, I told you two to wait downstairs." Ethan shrugged. "We thought it'd be safer if we waited closer." I groaned internally, recognizing that tone in his voice, the one that said he wasn't planning on backing down anytime soon. "Right," I muttered, trying to sound casual but feeling anything. "We just thought, better safe than sorry." Ariana's expression softened, but she still looked slightly annoyed. "Matthew, Ethan, I can handle myself." Her gaze shifted to Grayson, and for a split second, a faint blush rose to her cheeks, then back to us, as if weighing whether or not to explain further. I studied her carefully. The way she reacted made it clear something had happened between them, but I wasn't about to bring it up, especially not with Ethan here, ready to turn anything into a full-blown interrogation. Ethan turned to Ariana, his eyes narrowing as he took in the blush, still dusting her cheeks. He put on a casual smile, but I could see the tension in his stance as he asked, "So, my beautiful sister, tell us, have you talked it out with him? Did you end it?" Ariana held his gaze, and without missing a beat, she reached for Grayson's hand, her fingers intertwining with his. Ethan and I both froze, jaws dropping as she replied, "I'm getting back with him." A heavy silence filled the air, thick with the weight of Ariana's declaration. I exchanged a glance with Ethan, who looked as if he had been struck by lightning. His expression morphed from surprise to outright disbelief, and I could feel my heart drop into my stomach. "What?" Ethan blurted, his voice laced with disbelief. "Are you serious?" Ariana remained composed, but there was a defiance in her posture that I hadn't seen before. "I am serious. We're back together, and I'm going back to the USA with him." Her tone was steady, the confidence in her voice contrasting sharply with the disbelief etched on our faces. Before I could fully process her words, Ethan untangled their hands, his grip firm as he dragged Ariana away from Grayson. "We need to talk," he stated, his voice low but urgent. I followed closely behind, the tension crackling in the air as we stepped into the empty hallway. "Ari, what are you thinking?" I blurted out before Ethan could say anything. "What do you mean you're back with him? That man is married to another woman." "They're divorced," Ariana replied sharply, cutting me off. I hesitated, processing her words, but she didn't give me a chance to respond. "And I don't want any of your advice because it's useless now," she continued, a fierce determination in her eyes. "I needed it before, but not anymore. I've fallen for him. No, I love him." Ethan started to speak, but she silenced him with a fierce look. "Please don't say a word, Ethan. I know what you're going to say. I made my decision." She took a breath, the determination in her eyes unwavering. "I was heading down to tell you the news until you came up." I exchanged a glance with Ethan, the weight of her words hanging heavily between us. It was clear she had made up her mind, and no amount of reason would sway her now. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, his frustration evident as he looked down for a brief moment. When he met Ariana's gaze again, there was a new resolve in his eyes. "Is that what you want? Fine, you can go back with him, but on one condition. Matthew and I are tagging along, and that's final." He turned to me, his expression serious. "You keep an eye on them. I'll head home and grab both our credentials." Without waiting for a response, Ethan strode back toward the penthouse. I glanced at Ariana, and after a moment's hesitation, we followed him inside. He approached Grayson, his tone demanding as he asked, "I need your passport or identification card." Grayson furrowed his brow, confusion crossing his face. "What's this about?" Ariana stepped forward, shoving Ethan to face her. "Stop it," she urged, frustration lacing her words. Ethan ignored her, unwavering in his demand. "Just give me either of what I asked for. We're following our sister to the US, since you manipulated her to come with you. But I need to get home first for our travel documents. I want to make sure you don't leave before I get back." Ariana raised her voice at Ethan, but Grayson interrupted her gently. "It's all right. I will give it to him." Grayson walked across the room to the big couch where his coat lay, pulling out his wallet. He retrieved his ID and held it out to Ethan. Ethan rushed forward, snatching the card from Grayson's hands. "I'll be back," he said, determination etched on his face. Grayson nodded, replying coolly, "The driver will be waiting for you outside." Without another word, Ethan stormed out, leaving Ariana and me in a whirlwind of emotions as we processed the weight of the moment. The cabin of the private plane was spacious, sleek and quiet, with only the hum of the engines breaking the silence. It was just the four of us, Ethan, Ariana, Grayson, and myself, along with the pilots up front and a service attendant who looked like she'd just dropped from heaven. The moment she walked by, offering drinks in a voice smooth as silk, I caught Ethan's eyes following her every move. I swallowed a chuckle, thinking to myself, can't blame him. The girl is stunning. Her dark hair was tied in a neat bun, accentuating her high cheekbones and doe-like eyes that sparkled with a touch of mystery. She wore a fitted navy dress that made her look both chic and untouchable. I couldn't help but wonder if this was part of Grayson's plan, to throw us off our game with a distraction so stunning that we'd ease up, maybe even relax. The guy was as calculated as they came, and it seemed perfectly in character that he'd set up the scene just right, even down to the choice of flight attendant. Ethan shifted in his seat, tearing his gaze away from her for a brief moment to shoot a wary glance at Grayson. But Grayson was calm, reclining back with an unreadable expression as he glanced out the window, one hand resting lazily on the armrest. Ariana, beside him, was lost in her thoughts, arms crossed as she looked down at her hands, no doubt turning over 1,000 things in her mind. Grayson leaned over to her, whispering something too low for me to catch, and she gave a faint nod. I watched as he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his fingers brushing against her skin in a way that felt surprisingly tender for someone as ruthless as Grayson Anderson. Ethan leaned closer to me, muttering under his breath, "You think this is all a show?" I glanced back at the attendant, who was now pouring a glass of champagne with a perfect, practiced smile. "Probably," I replied, shrugging. "But hey, I'm not complaining." Ethan huffed, crossing his arms as he tried and failed to keep his gaze focused elsewhere. He was clearly tense, but Grayson's little distraction was working, if only a bit. The flight attendant approached again, stopping by Ethan with a soft smile as she held out a glass. "Champagne?" Ethan hesitated, caught off guard, then took the glass with a nod, mumbling his thanks. She lingered just a second longer, her gaze flicking to him in a way that seemed pointed. Then, with a graceful turn, she moved to the next row. I leaned over to Ethan, smirking. "Maybe this trip won't be so bad after all." Ethan rolled his eyes, trying to maintain his composure, but the faint flush on his face told me Grayson's little scheme might just be working better than he'd expected. After what felt like an endless flight, we finally landed. The drive from the airport was silent, tension settling heavily in the car as we sped down the winding roads leading to Grayson's estate. Outside, sprawling landscapes stretched out beneath the bright blue sky, but none of us seemed to notice, each lost in our own thoughts. Grayson sat beside Ariana in the back seat, his hand resting lightly on hers as he whispered something now and then, his voice low and reassuring. She looked tired, her gaze distant as she nodded along, but her expression gave nothing away. Eventually, we turned down a private, tree-lined road, the canopy overhead casting dappled shadows across the car, and soon Grayson's estate behind the high iron gate came into view. The driver eased to a stop at the entrance, and a group of men swiftly approached, opening the car doors for us. Ethan jolted slightly, clearly caught off guard by their sudden appearance. As we started toward the house, Ethan suddenly stopped, his gaze fixed on something, or someone, up ahead, before he whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "Aunt Ruth." I halted and turned to him, then followed his gaze, my own eyes landing on that older woman, Florence, standing at the entrance, welcoming Grayson with a formal nod. I leaned closer, keeping my voice low. "You know that woman?" Ethan nodded, etched with disbelief. "That's Aunt Ruth," he murmured, barely moving. "Mum's sister. What's she doing here?"